Welcome back, chess friends, to Baghdad in the 920s, where our champion, Al-Suli, is now going to be playing the almighty and powerful Caliph Al-Muqtadir up here. As you can see, in those days, the pieces were a bit different, and the rules were a bit different. I'll link all the rules down below, but just as a quick reminder, the important rules are that the pawns can only move one square forward at a time. We have elephants instead of bishops, and they jump 2 squares diagonally, a bit like a cross between a bishop and a knight, and the advisor, which can only move 1 square diagonally at a time. With that out of the way, this is the second of these old games that I'm going to go through, and it's the last one because there are no more than this. And stick around because this has got a very nice ending. We have Al-Suli opening with g3, we have g6, g4, and now f6 from the Caliph, and you'll see that his plan is just to push most of his pawns forward 1 square, and that's his entire opening, and he's just going to refuse to do anything else, at least during the opening moves. We have e3, e6, knight to e2, d6, rook to g1, c6, f3, b6, f4, and now instead of doing some sort of development of his pieces, he goes for a6. We now have f5 challenging these pawns on the e and g files, and the Caliph captures, and Al-Suli captures back, and this basically gambits this pawn away, but it leaves the Caliph with double pawns along the f file. And maybe this is a structural weakness, we'll see how it goes. We have now elephant to h3 from Al-Suli, and now knight to e7, rook to f1, so that's a bit strange, getting off of the open file, but he is now pressuring this pawn with the elephant and with the rook, so he's only got 1 defender, so we'll see if this leads to anything. Rook to g8 along the open file, and now knight to g3, so now there's 3 attackers on the pawn with only 1 defender. And the Caliph brings his rook up to add an extra defender, but obviously it's not enough, and we have the elephant captures the pawn. So even on material, but it looks like Al-Suli's getting his pieces into better positions at this early stage. We continue with h6, and now Al-Suli brings his elephant back. It probably would have been fine just sitting here, but he decides to bring it back anyway. And we play on with knight to d7, d3, d5, and now Al-Suli should probably play a nice developing move, knight to c3, but he goes for the pawn to c3 instead. And this allows the Caliph to bring his knight to e5, except he doesn't play that. Instead, he develops his advisor. And we continue with b3, but again, a nice move for Al-Suli would have been to advance d4 so as to block the knight coming in. Okay, he played b3. And now we have rook to a7, which seems pretty daft because, again, this knight move to e5 was still available, and this just seems to do nothing. But okay, we have c4, which leaves a space on c3 for the knight to come out, but again, it leaves e5 available for the Caliph's knight. But the Caliph ignores it and plays his elephant, so Al-Suli just brings his knight to c3, as we said, again leaving the e5 square open for Al-Muqtadir. And again, he ignores it and brings his other elephant out. We now have captures and captures on d5, and now d4, finally blocking the entrance of the knight. We have the elephant back to f8, which seems a bit cowardly or wasteful. Maybe a better idea would have been to keep pushing forward with the pawns and try to restrict blue's space, but okay. The elephant went back to f8. We have rook to f2, and then the advisor comes to d6, the zigzag maneuver that we mentioned in the last game. Now, this f6 pawn is something to watch out for. It's a weak pawn that Al-Suli generated in the opening moves of the game with his gambit, and at some point he's going to want to leverage this weakness to mount an attack. But before he can do that, he'd like to neutralize any counter-attacking possibilities from the Caliph on the advisor's side of the board. Not the queen's side, the advisor's side. There are no queens. So as part of this, he pushes b4. And now the Caliph brings his rook to c7 along this open file. And we have king to d2 from Al-Suli. And now the Caliph pushes b5, which is just what Al-Suli wants, because he wants to bring the elephant here up to the strong c5 square supported by these two pawns. So he starts off elephant to a3. We have knight to b6. Perhaps he's heading for this outpost here. And the elephant jumps into c5 as planned. And now we have knight to c6. a3 backing up the pawn that was attacked by this knight move. And king to f7. You notice that this pawn is, excuse me, you'll notice that this pawn is undefended and under attack from the rook here. So the king comes up to defend. And we have the advisor to c2 and the elephant to the outpost on c4, not the knight. The elephant came here, that's very nice. And now rook on a to f1, doubling up along the semi-open file, x-raying the king. This is looking quite forceful. Rook back to g6, so the Caliph wants to add another defender to the pawn, but Al-Suli comes in with the knight to h5, adding another attacker again. So what does the Caliph do to defend this? Well, if he tries this move, knight to d7, adding another defender, it undefends this pawn, which forks the rook and adds another attacker to the pawn. So he decides not to go for that. Instead, his plan is to bravely run away with his king. So Al-Suli just captures the pawn now, and that comes with check, so he runs away even harder. And now, this is a nice move. The knight captures the d5 pawn, which reveals an attack on the elephant on the back rank, as well as attacking the rook here. And now, the rooks are the strongest pieces in the game, so the Caliph decides to run away with the rook now to b7. The rook captures the elephant, which comes with check, so the king goes to d7. But this isn't safe from the elephant here, which comes to f5 and delivers another check. So rather than running away, he now has to run into danger. And now the next move is the end of this game. It's very nice. Just see if you can spot it. I'll let you have a couple of seconds. You can maybe even pause the video if you like. Let's see. Well, if you spotted it, good job. It was knight to f4, which delivers checkmate. So, well, it's delivering the check, and the elephant here guards this square, this elephant guards this square, this rook guards these two squares, the pawn guards this square, and the knight guards the remaining square here. So a very, very nice checkmate indeed. I really like this one. So yeah, that's the last of our 920s games. There are no more available for us to look at, and I very much enjoyed going through them with you. So I'll see you again next time.